I haven't said anything yet. So, I don't give these talks very often, and the ones before have usually or often been presented as a kind of recruiting, meaning I would be introducing a workshop or a 10-week lab or production process, and I'm just looking for people to play with, to work with, people that might resonate with some of the basic principles and methods that I've been developing for over 42 years. So I've been at this a long time. And so there's no recruiting here. I've stopped presenting workshops and labs 3 years ago. 6 months before the pandemic, I decided I'm done. 42 years was enough, and not only enough, but it has, because I've actually done the work, I'm not just teaching it or facilitating, I've undergone and been subject to this process for a long time. It has had an ongoing impact on my nervous system, my state of mind, my outlook. It's basically been a life-changing event. So if you are interested, there's going to be a local, I think, weekend workshop led by someone I've trained here over several labs and a couple of productions. His name's Ed Welsh. And there's Ed. You talk to him afterwards. At the end of August, the last weekend of August, he has booked this space, and he's going to be starting up an experiment, which is basically a really good way to describe what it is that we're doing as an experiment. It's a social experiment overall, what I'm going to be describing, but it's peculiar because the method towards realizing the social experiment is asocial. It's a social experiment because basically we're in a room with 9 or 10 individuals, and we're discovering how to interact and to express ourselves. So there's people. It's a social event, but we're moving in alignment with what I call an asocial climate. And the asocial climate is one of the critical key points that I've discovered over the years. And by the way, every idea and theory that we're presenting here has been applied, hundreds of times over and over again. It's all been tested. So I'm not going to be really talking about theory without having it already been gone through many experiments through many different individuals. Several hundred individuals have gone through this process since it started in 1977. So there are a few kind of key ideas that define this work and how we go about experiencing basically the process of making the unconscious conscious. This process mirrors, but doesn't replicate, Carl Jung's method of active imagination. Only we approach the process giving expression to the contents of the subconscious, making it conscious, in a visceral, somatic, and movement-based way. We don't, lay down on a couch next to a therapist or sit down in a chair and have someone, psychoanalyze us. It's not like that at all. So it's basically a very physical and vocal expression of the internal landscape. And what I mean by the internal landscape, in this work we look at the physical body as the embodiment of the subconscious mind. It's not a brain thing, it's a body thing. The brain comes into play for sure. And what I mean by the invisible landscape, the internal landscape, is really about the emanations, energy, and constant interaction of multiple biological systems completely invisible to the naked eye, to the ego. And so this process is really one of turning the ego from, or the attention, because oftentimes they're related, from the external environment for stimulus, whether it's other people or the walls or whatever's in the room, and turning it around and starting with the ego or the attention faces within. So there's a withdrawal of attention. So solitude plays a big role in this. A big part of the asocial climate actually begins with realizing your non-responsibility to other people in the room. Not very social, right? And part of this involves a contract, not a contract, kind of a vow, a silent vow. You don't make it to myself, you make it to yourself, of basically doing your best to become accountable for your own safety. And what I mean by that is that, you know, in this work, your own kind of process when you're in the movement process of it, maybe interrupted. You might hear someone scream on the other side of the room and you're like, whoa, what was that? Or you might start hearing someone laughing hysterically. Or they're on the floor pounding, weeping. It's like, what's going on? You can get thrown, you can get tipped. And so that just means that you've had a perceived threat. There's no real actual threats here. If there's any actual threats to this work is you know, you being clumsy and, you know, tripping and spraining your ankle or something. You know, other than that, any kind of fear-based reaction or perceived threat, it's usually from noise or people moving really fast by you and you go, oh, what was that? So what does it mean when you get tipped? Well, you do everything you can right in the moment to make yourself feel safe again. Whatever it is, it's an experiment. It's a discovery process. For example, people, well, how do I do that? I said, okay, I'm gonna give you a really kind of a dumb example. It could work, but it's just kind of dumb. Just start jumping up and down until you feel the soles of your feet and maybe get your feet back on the ground. Oh, okay, and then they try that and it doesn't work, but then they try something better, something more personal to them. This is how I make myself safe when I feel threatened. It's a great survival tool, right? To actually know the difference between perceived threat and actual threat. Huge, right? Especially in this day and age. There's a lot of perceived threats being thrown around and some very real ones. So it's good to know the diff. So back to the internal landscape. To engage, to access and engage the experiences that the body has to offer through the emanations of the organs and the interactions in the endocrine system, the muscular system, the electrical nervous system, the skeletal system. These are all accessed in this work as movement resources. Each one of them is a source of energy. But how to develop enough receptivity, so let's say you're standing there and you actually can feel your skeleton in your body. And you get a little bit closer to that skeleton and you start walking. Let's walk the skeleton walk. And all of a sudden your whole walk changes because now you're in the bones. You're walking the bone walk. The skeletal system is a source. Nervous system is a source. You know, come direct energy of the nervous system, and you're like, it could be like, oh, there it is, I'm feeling it now. Muscular system, the same. So all these systems are in constant interaction. They can be, for the purpose of ritual and experimentation, they can be isolated. You know, just in moments, you know, you just do the skeletal. Now move into the muscular. Now how does that feel moving into the electrical nervous system? Because they're all connected. And the very fascinating thing that starts happening, you start feeling the transitions, the links between these systems through their expression, through you, in movement, and sometimes sound. Sometimes, you know, in this work, the sounds that we produce are primarily through a method of resonance. You know, we work not to push the sound out. What we look to do is we feel an energy, and we just find a sound that matches the frequency of that energy. Just match the energy with the sound, and sound will come. Sound follows energy. It will find itself. And that brings it a whole different dimension, you know, when vocalization happens. The whole process is primarily nonverbal. And this is not a talking medium. Sometimes, occasionally, we'll use one word. You know, we'll be sourcing a particular energy, and I will just make a suggestion, like, if there is one word that just kind of comes out, let's find it. But avoid cliches, for example. Sometimes this work is just very hilarious. So let's say someone is sourcing the feminine, and they're all kind of in this kind of feminine reverie, and womb. No. That's the mind thinking, feminine womb, or, yeah. So we're learning to kind of bypass more of the kind of predictable, cliche kind of associations. And when we do that, we commit deeper to the source itself and let the source decide what the word's going to be. It may come up completely different than womb or, you know, breasts or beautiful, or whatever, you know, we mentally associate with feminine. And that's where we're going. We're really looking forward to developing rapport with the internal landscape and allowing it to issue forth, offering its gifts. And the gifts come through force of emotion. It comes through force of sensation. It even comes through images. And once that starts happening, it's a very intriguing thing that occurs, because when you start having images, very often they are going to be coming from a more cultural, socially accepted place. So, for example, with the feminine, you know, certain images that might come out, we are very stereotypical feminine and not really authentic to the essence of feminine, let's say. And everybody, you decide what that is yourself. I'm not going to judge, you know, what is authentic or not with you. But this is part of what happens oftentimes, is that when we tap into the image level of the internal landscape, it starts flooding us with images that we see in our media and our culture, and it's got nothing to do with us, it's impersonal. It's got nothing to do with your experience of the feminine. And so when we hit that point of being overwhelmed by cultural artifacts and images and influence, sometimes it's best just to play it out, meaning make a fool of yourself. You know, dance that stereotypical feminine thing that you just saw in your head. Embody it, make a fool of yourself. This can help discharge the you know, the vapid image, and then kind of leave space, create space. Or you can just kind of, let's say, you know, diss it, just say, don't want that, don't want that image, don't, and just keep, you know, letting it go until you come into a deeper receptivity to something more authentic. Now, what is it? How do we enter into a deeper receptivity so that we might be able to begin even accessing the internal landscape, let alone giving expression to it. That is the big question, and that process is what we call in this work no form, which we approach in a standing position. It's a term borrowed from Zen meditation, and its principles really aligned with Zen, except we do not sit, because you can't really move much. You're sitting, meditating, you're stuck on the floor, you're not going to move. So this is always in a standing position at first when you're learning it, and then as you get more prolific with it, you can enter no form in any posture that you're in the midst of, like in a performance, for example. A performer will be accessing a certain source in the performance, because we don't choreograph or stage anything. It's all performers accessing specific sources, and everything that comes out on the stage is first time, last time. And they may just tap out, meaning that they just disconnect from the energy. I've given, I can't give anymore. And so they go into some kind of gesture, and you can go to no form just down here, and then start sourcing that same energy from another posture, and almost like come back to life, like a statue come back to life again. And so this is part of this kind of almost like a stylistic approach to that particular performance problem, when a performer is up on stage and they just get disconnected from what they're doing, or they get distracted, or they lose track of the energy that they were tapping into. Stop. Don't fake it. Don't push it. Stop. Just, stillness is a part of performance. A really powerful part, and there should be more of it, I think, in performance. But use that stillness to return to the source. Nobody will know, the audience doesn't know. And then come back to life and continue. You don't have to go off stage, you don't have to run away. We can just do it all in front of everybody. So, you following me so far?
Yes.
Okay. There'll be a Q&A towards the end. We're about 20 minutes into it now. After this main talk, which is about an hour, I'll read a couple of entries from this book here, my newest book, Sacred Rites, Journal Entries of a Gnostic Heretic. That's me. Maybe it's you too. And then after those two excerpts, we'll have a Q&A. And then the books, you can come check them out. Okay, so I'm going to be presenting basically 4 levels that have been consistent throughout the last 40 plus years in this work. The first 3 levels more than all 4. The 4th level refers to performative skills, and how this particular work, which really starts out in chaos and pretty much a mess, in terms of, in the beginning stages, you're looking at it from someone in it, and they go, what? I don't understand what's happening. It looks like they're like insane or something. So the first level, this is how I discovered the primary methods of this work. These methods are not borrowed from Grotowski, whose work inspired me as a Polish theater director, Jerzy Grotowski, who in the 70s underwent a stage of his 40-year era that he called paratheater. And witnessing a film document of a performance that came from that period, it's kind of life-changing, because what I saw was something I had never seen before as theater or as ritual or as performance. It was quite unique, especially in the super high commitment. The actors, the performers showed moment to moment. It was just almost exhausting to watch. How can I do that? That's way over my head. But I wanted to be part of it somehow. It inspired me. I wanted to move forward on some impulse that came from watching that. And then I read his book, Towards a Poor Theater, which is his primary kind of syllabus, where he goes into his work and explains it and stuff. So anyway, there was no way I was going to be like Grotowski or replicate him or anything like that, because his actors were way too acrobatic, and his approach was actually kind of brutal. And although I have brutality in me, I don't have that much. I have just enough, I guess. But so I knew I had to follow a different direction, and my direction had already started about 10 years earlier in training, teaching, and performing a particular form of mime theater called the American Mime Theater Method. And this is a school in New York City. It's still there. The director of the school has passed away. But I was fortunate enough to be trained by one of his early proteges, Keith Berger, over about a year when I was very young. I was about 17. And at the time, I was in, like a teenage crisis like so many others. And I didn't like talking a lot. I was kind of a silent dude. And it shows me how to communicate non-verbally with these methods. And it was like, oh my God, that's the rest of my life. It was just like, I can do this. I need this. I need to find a way to communicate without words. Wow. And so he saw my commitment, my excitement, and I learned maybe 7 things really well. There was like about 30 or 40 things to learn in that school, maybe probably more. But I learned 7 things that were kind of cohesive enough so that I could develop characters, performances, teaching structures around that, which I did for the next 10 years. But this particular mime theater is extremely different from what I entered in 1977 with the ParaTheatrical. It's like the opposite. That mime theater was dictated on the level of total control that I could have over my body and determine every single direction that I want to go in beforehand. Very self-determined. And I got really good at it. I got paid for it. I thought it was going to be a career as a solo mime artist because it was kind of going that way. And then I hit a wall. Yeah, that wall is called no form. Yeah, so in 1977, very briefly, I met with David Rosenblum in Berkeley, California, where I was living. And he was a painter, an artist. He painted religious icon kind of abstract art. He was a guitarist, and he was a professional clairvoyant with theatrical sensibilities. He was really passionate about creating a certain kind of theater, but not anything like he had seen. And so he had rounded up, this is so funny, he rounded up 6 individuals from the Berkeley Psychic Institute and basically told them that he wants to experiment with tapping into the chakras as energy sources to animate movement, characters, possibly a theater production of some kind. So energy in the body, accessing that. He was also somewhat proficient with Zen, so he introduced the notion of no form there. And at the time, I was living, actually not in Berkeley yet, I was living in Mendocino, and he calls me up and he tells me all this, right? And he says, come on down, we need you. And I said, no way, I really like it where I am. Fuck you. I did. I was really pissed off that he would even think of. I was having a wonderful life in Mendocino, 23 years old. I just finished directing a 3-act poem play by E.E. Cummings, Him, and just having the time of my life. And he goes, okay, I'll see you down here then. Oh, man. Oh, and I was down there a month later in that group, experimenting with them, and introducing what the no form process became central to what he was trying to establish, because you had to cultivate a lot more receptivity internally to begin touching on these energy centers up and down the spine. And I just wasn't getting it. It was like we were meeting 3 or 4 times, and I was just kind of standing there, nothing's happening, nothing. Well, that's part of the no form experience. It starts with nothing happening. Nothing, get it? But the nothing is very deceptive. It's actually a something. And then spontaneously, I don't know what triggered it, I fell flat on my face laughing my ass off. And I just couldn't stop laughing. I was down there, and David comes over and he says, I think you got no form. I did, because after that point, I was able to find that receptivity and join the others in the work. So from that point on, they broke up after 6 months, and the work became so valuable to me, but I had to learn to relax my desire to control. You know, my status as a mime artist was basically on the skids at this point, because it's like oil and water, those two mediums. And I have combined them a bit in my performances since, but they're very different. And so I had to focus in on one, I had to choose one or the other. It's kind of like, who do I get married to? You know, it was almost like that. Which path do I go on? It was a no-brainer, because it's what happened with the paratheater work. It opened me up to playing fields of creativity and creation far beyond what my mind up to that point was dictating as creative. Mental constructs, ideas of creativity. But I had not yet tapped into the eternal track of creation that exists moment to moment every single day of every single night. Doesn't stop. Oh, you might feel that sometimes you're in a non-productive period, but that creation track goes underground. It's got fallow periods, just like in the agriculture, you know, ways. You know, they fallow field, they burn the field, and then they reseed. Creation never stops. And so that's what I'm talking about. I was confronted with endless creative energy. And I just started learning to live with that. That was a big change in my thinking, and just, you know, all this energy. What do I do with it? Well, I gotta do something. I can't sit on it. I can't sit on this energy. It's hot. It's like fire energy. All right, going back to the 4 levels. First level, instinctive. So I was here developing this new paratheater medium, and there's got to be methods that are organic to the body, because I'm really tapping into the body as a source. So what I was looking at was, I was 24, 25 years old. At the time, I was producing a series of experimental theater works that I wrote and directed every year for about 5 years straight in Berkeley. During this time, this is what I had all this energy for. I was actually able to produce these productions. But in the meantime, I had the privilege of observing actors, observing audience, observing all kinds of people that I hadn't, had the privilege of seeing before, except, walking on the street or taking a bus or something like that. And what I was looking for was unconscious behavior, where people were doing stuff seemingly unaware that they were doing it. And then I started seeing differentiations, different types of unconscious behavior. It wasn't just like one thing. And each of these seemed to be part of a different method if it was made conscious. Meaning whatever the thing that was that you were doing unconsciously, if you could identify what that was, you just do it on purpose. That becomes a different experience. That's making the unconscious conscious right away. So anyway, the territorial instincts. We all know about territoriality. Some of us are more territorial than others, and oftentimes it's like, mine, don't touch that. Where did that come from? You were being threatened. Territory, you know, oftentimes on unconscious level, a lot of stuff you see in the streets, territorial, unconscious territorial shit going on. In this work, by pushing it up into consciousness, making an example of making the territorial instinct conscious, doing it on purpose. In this work, in the beginning of each 3-hour session, I ask individuals to, like 9 or 10 in this room itself, where we've done this over and over here, to move through the space and kind of feel, is there a spot or an area in the space that sort of feels like yours, like your spot? Where's your spot? So and I say, don't think about it, just kind of feel it out, going around. And once you find your spot, own that spot, make it yours. Don't just stand there with your mind saying, oh, the spot is mine. You can do that, that'll help a little bit, but physically, like an animal claims turf, you find a way to own the space around you. This is mine, mine. Oh, I have energy, not mine, out of here. I just want my energy in my own spot. So you establish conscious territoriality. And what this does is it starts a sense of personal safety. You know, a really important part of this work. And by the way, this work is clearly not for everybody. The individuals that don't do as well in it are oftentimes in an unstable phase of their life. You know, they're between jobs or between relationships, or they just got evicted, or they're floating. They're drifting. And the reason being is that where this work is going is really towards destabilization, is moving towards opening up to a greater state of uncertainty. And in this process, we relate to the state of uncertainty as a creative state. So here, uncertainty is not the same as anxiety. Uncertainty is an objective truth of existence. Nobody fucking knows what's going to happen next. We have certain frame in our mind, to kind of set, nothing's going. I know what's going to happen next. I'm just going to keep sitting here. Yes, maybe not. So, anxiety is a very personal reaction to your threshold of uncertainty, meaning how much uncertainty can you permit before you start acting like a nervous monkey, right? And so it's an education in learning to permit more uncertainty so that you can move into deeper creative states. To me, a creative state, generally speaking, tends to be fluid, where there's possibilities, where things aren't just set. In a sense, you're improvising, you're making it up as you go along. Now, the creative state is going to be defined and known differently by each person, but that's kind of like my take on it. And so over the years, this is one of the big impacts the work has had on my life. I stopped being an anxiety guy like 30 years ago. I don't get anxiety anymore. I don't live in fear, although I really respect real fear. You know, I'm on the street, you know, someone's coming at me. I'm not going to pretend, oh, this is a video game, I can get out of here. No, I'm going to run. And if I have to, I'll fight, but I'd rather run. So living more or less without fear, and, you know, anxiety, I used to be more anxious until kind of flipping the switch on this idea of uncertainty as a creative state. And it has completely changed my life in terms of, you know, how prolific my artistic life has become over the last 30 years. I'm now editing my 16th feature. That's 16. That is kind of crazy to think about that. And written like 10 books, all of them in print, published. And this is all from staying close to staying creative in life. You know, it's kind of like what I call living the art life. Well, enough about me. I'm going to go back here to sharing with you more unconscious behavior sources. So there's something called domestication that oftentimes it seems so banal and mundane, and people, it's easy to overlook the power that some of us have more than others. You know, some of us are late bloomers in being housebroken or whatever. But there's a certain innate capacity, two of them actually. One of them is called, has been called the home site selection, and it refers to a kind of, to the base of the spine as a kind of geomantic tuning fork that somehow, and some of us have this stronger than others, but I think everybody has it, that, you know, you're traveling around, whether it's within Oregon or across country or around the world, and you come into a new area, a new region, and there's just such a profound affirmation like, oh my God, I could live here. Or maybe I'm already living here and don't know it. Meaning that there's a profound resonance with the land, with the place, the power of the place. In other places you show up and says, I'm out of here. I don't like the buzz here. I don't like the vibe of this place. And that's the same thing. Basically this mind contracts and says, this is not for me. This is not for your energy. This is not to be run. So home site selection is called. You can Google it. It'll tell you a little bit more about that. And what's related to that is this domestication dimension that some individuals have in spades, where they just almost magically can make an empty house into a beautiful home. That somehow they are able to infuse a sense of sanctuary, safety, beauty, comfort, in ways that other people just leave them dumbfounded. How do you do that? You enter in their house and it's just like, oh my God, I feel so good here. And you enter someone else's house, it's like, oh, do the college students live here? So nothing against college students. I think you know what I'm saying. So there's that, and that has its own kind of power, and it's to me it's quite mysterious. It's not so mundane, so to speak. There's a real sense of what I call sustaining care, which is where you care about something enough that it actually sustains you. And this is what a good home does. It just sustains us. It's a sustaining place. That's what I think a good home has to do to meet the need, you know, the emotional, physical need for sustenance of the soul. And food too, always food. So there's that. All right, now we get to the fun stuff. So, the next, oh, by the way, that can be turned into a ritual skill in a process called the sanctification of the ritual space, of making the space safe enough for you to be there, but also safe enough for others to be there. So that in making that, kind of a conscious, doing it on purpose, it's not like you're bringing in, kitchenware and pots and pans and kitchen stuff, but there's an energy that can be tapped from the domestic power to bring a sense of safety, sanctuary into the space. And some of us have that power enough to do it for the group. And so what it does is establishes a field of safety. Even it can move into a sense of the sacred. And the thing is, when we feel safe, just energetically in a room with others, it's a lot easier to play. It's a lot easier to be vulnerable. It's a lot easier to, just to be more of yourself. Not have to put on facades or, go into that social, trying to impress people or whatever. So the next one is called authority projections. Oh my God. So typically, this is not, I'm not saying it, I'm not a psychologist, but I think oftentimes, the father, how you were raised and treated by your father, can define a certain idea in your head around what authority is. And depending on whether you rebelled against your dad or conformed to him because he was stronger than you and he could whip you and you couldn't escape. So you had that kind of nightmare childhood of always being afraid of the dad, afraid of authority, hating authority, that kind of thing. So this comes out in projections onto individuals and sometimes groups like the police, where you project their authority. Doctors in hospitals. Oh, you know better than I do. Just tell me what to do. I'll take that pill. Thank you. And you're out. Making it on purpose, meaning projecting authority on purpose. First you have to somehow be aware that you're doing it, of course, and kind of check in to see, okay, is this a knee-jerk rebellion against this person that kind of acts authoritative? Are they really in authority? So the process of reclaiming authority projections is a little more challenging, especially in the culture at large, because that's I'm thinking it might be a kind of a covert police state. I don't think it's overt yet, but wait until Trump goes to jail, then maybe we'll see some action. I'm not pro-Trump. It's a difficult level of self-work because to reclaim your authority, you have to define what authority is. So in this work, I do offer a definition of spiritual authority. And this is so people can stop pretending I have it. Because I only have it for myself. I've gone too far to give it to anybody else. And that definition of spiritual authority that I present to individuals is that I tell them, I said, your own direct experience is how I'm going to relate to your spiritual authority in this work. And your capacity for actually having an experience is part of what we're going to learn in this work. This is one of the aims of this work, to actually restore a sense of spontaneity to whether it's a performing artist or a non-performance artist who may have gotten stuck in a certain routine, gotten really good at doing what they do, whether they're singing, painting, writing. Every artist will find a rut somewhere to dig themselves into in this part of the process. And they lose touch with that spontaneity. They lose touch with having an actual experience that they can then create from. and have a chance of participating in living art. Art that's alive. It's been my experience that any art created out of conscious mind is dead art. Shoot me. No, don't shoot me. But that's been my experience. So I'm always looking for ways to stay open to the moment, stay in the present time. This is part of the staying creative direction that I've committed to, which I'll talk about a little later. Okay, the next projection process gets really messy. This is one of the messier ones. Carl Jung used the term anima and animus to refer to powerful, autonomous archetypes. You know, these are not energies that we've made up or imagined, although it may seem like that at some times. And we typically become aware of them, men and women differently. And right now I'm not going to go into all the non-binary options. Most of them I don't have experience with. I've been an old heterosexual most of my life. Probably, all my life, So, in the heterosexual man, depending on his relationship with his mother and the degree of mother love that he knows, it forms an image in his psyche over the years of mother love that moves into love of the feminine, and it becomes fashioned in his psyche as a kind of feminine ideal. And then one day, some actual woman will cross his path and will trigger that because she kind of looks like that image or feels like it or talks like it, and he's just like, I'm in love with you. Oh, I want you. And then the anima archetype flies out of his body onto her, and she feels the force of it. She goes, oh yeah, you love me, worship me. This feels great. I love you too, maybe. And so there's that, and that becomes a very messy direction because the woman doesn't stand a chance to sustain the behavior and the quality and the tone and everything of a fucking archetype 24/7. And it's not gonna happen. So, you know, occasionally at some point there will be a disappointment, like, oh, maybe I don't love you. You used to be this way and now you're that. No, she was always who she was. You've been projecting on her, and occasionally you've caught little glimpses of her, but mostly you've been not seeing the woman. So it's heartbreak, catastrophic romance. It can be extremely spiritually informative if you're waking up to the projection and you discover that you need a soul retrieval ritual to call it back, to call back the projection, claim it, and see if you can develop some kind of relationship with this archetype. And sometimes people, you know, write poems to her, or set up some kind of inner dialogue, or some kind of, they might make a painting of her, for her, the anima. It's not my animus, it's not proprietal. These are autonomous. It's a mistake to say this is my animus or that is your animus. People do it all the time. They don't understand, you know, the nature of the archetype itself. It doesn't belong to anybody. This is part of its power. It's impersonal. It's not so personal. You make it personal by identifying with it and thinking. Anyway, it's messy. It's messy for different ways for the woman who projects onto the man. Very different psychology, and very different consequences when the projection takes hold, and then the man is somehow not able to keep up the act of the, you know, the Superman or whatever, you know, however she has it in her head. And, there's arguing and fighting, and, it's where the word animosity comes from. Animosity, related directly to the negative anima, negative animus. So this is a very powerful projection that we can do it on purpose. In this ritual process, we work with the anima and animus as sources in the work itself. We just do it on purpose, but we don't put it on anybody. We make a circle, and we go into no form. We find the receptivity, and we know where that anima is. And she's in there somewhere, and you just say, go in the circle. And then when you're receptive enough, really empty enough, you slowly walk into the circle, and you stand there. You don't do anything, you just absorb. You just absorb the energy that you sent there. It's very real. And it starts filling you up. And it comes to a point, if you can allow it, if you don't try to control it, it starts to kind of shape you. It starts like, coming into some kind of expression that's not you telling it what to do, but it's just kind of coming out. There's a sense of grace about it. This is where we're going. This is the aim. It doesn't always happen that way because it takes practice. So there you go. The shadow archetype. Yum. Oh man. So Jung refers to the shadow archetype, again, an autonomous energy, as a collection of traits about yourself that embarrass you, that you don't want anybody to see, that you're ashamed of, that you're maybe afraid of. But basically, they stay in the shadow because you don't want anybody to know this about you, your secret, right? But as long as they remain unclaimed, and this is one of the more dangerous archetypes in society currently and over many millennium. Entire wars and bloodshed have occurred because of an out-of-control shadow archetype just wouldn't stop the murder. So it's quite serious because individuals cross our paths that remind us of something that we don't like about ourselves, and we are fucking annoyed. We don't know why. And we kind of throw shade on them or something, right? Or, we find ourselves judging somebody because we think we're better than them, or that we think they're, jerks or whatever. Because we have not been acquainted with the jerk within, or, king or queen asshole within yourself, within your own being. And so it gets thrown out onto them, and that can start an altercation sometimes. People pick up on the vibe. Well, you looking at me? You looking at me? They pick up on it. The energy is dark, and it's intense. And then the worst part of it, the projection on entire groups of people, entire species of people, races of people, sexual orientations of people, all kinds of groups, political, social collectives get this projection en masse, and we're approaching a pretty heavy duty era of that has already started, easily, when, as I recall, when Trump took office, whenever that was, like 5 years or 6 years ago, I was just astonished by the Pandora's box lid open up at that point, and him giving full-on permission to let's unleash the shadow here. He didn't say it like that, but basically he was a lightning rod for opening up the shadow projections. Had to happen, there's a lot of repressed shadow that was just aching to get out, as we know. So, yeah, that's a difficult one to tend to. But in this work, in the more advanced stages of this work, we do shadow work. And the main reason being is that once shadow projections can be made conscious and you're aware of them, and you make some decision that you don't want to behave that way anymore, perception opens up. Unlike anything I've experienced before, in my own shadow work, perceiving more reality than I was accustomed to, which to me is wonderful. I'm I'm an adventurous spirit. I like my consciousness expanded. Thank you very much. And it does it more than any of the other projections. Or maybe the anima projections too, but something about the shadow projections, it's so fucking collective, it's in orientation, that it really takes a load off when I find my peace, where I'm a little piece of shit. And I'm not making a bunch of little pieces of shit in my perception, because I already know I have enough shit of my own. All I gotta do is own my own shit and I'm fine. I will own my own shit. Don't have to own anybody else's shit, I'll own my own shit. And that sort of works for me. It's an ongoing process. And maybe the last area that I've noticed is with attention, the projection of attention. And what attention projects out are labels and meanings. And it happens unconsciously. We don't think about, I'm looking at a camera right now and I'm not thinking camera, my mind is already, and this is also can be troublesome because, we are very quick to label, quick to judge, quick to find meaning in things that may not have meaning, or they may have a very different kind of meaning that, you weren't aware of, and you go on thinking, oh, this means that, or this person means what he said, and you realize you're confused. You don't know anything about what that person means about what they said. You had projected your own meaning on it automatically. You assumed it was the truth. Assumptions are something I've learned to relax quite a bit. The saying, right? Assume is how you make an ass out of you and me. The word, break it up, assume. Ass, you, me. I really like that. So that's the first stage, just tapping into where the unconscious behavior is. There's energy there. This is where the power is. It's instinctive power, power of the body. It's primitive. It's the first stage. The second page is experimentation. You're basically spending time testing out, making each one conscious, finding out what it looks like and feels like to do each of them on purpose over and over again. This is an experiment stage, stage 2. Stage 3 is called development. And that's simply by practicing the process of making instinctive, unconscious energy projections into ritual skills by making them conscious. You do that over and over again, you develop skill sets. So development is about developing not just skill, but talent. Talent and skill, they're really different things. Talent, I think, is a little bit trickier to put my finger on what it is, but it's basically when you have a fluid access to the internal landscape, no real resistances, that you can really draw upon all manner of sources and so forth, and there's always spontaneity to talent, a freshness. Skill is something you practice, like a violin or a piano, and you just do it over and over again until you get good at it. And typically, to me, the standout artists are the ones out there performing at equal levels of talent and skill, that somehow they've been able to sustain both of them together. And it's very difficult to do because oftentimes someone will have so much talent it overwhelms their skills, their ability to articulate and put it into form, into a recognizable, relatable motif or whatever. And some individuals are really like almost virtuoso skill level people, that they really precise and clear and meticulous about the forms that they develop, but they lose the energy. They create a really pretty picture, really beautiful picture, very intriguing. But if you feel it, where's the feeling? They disconnect from the primitive, the first stage. So the whole process of art, I think, at a high level, is how to stay in touch with these primitive sources of energy, so you're not just channeling your ego, right? And develop skill along the side in such a way so that your skills don't crimp your talent. They don't crimp the spirit. Over skill can do that. Over form, too much form can kind of kill the spirit. Just like too much spontaneity can completely turn into chaos and dissolve whatever form or skill that you're developing. So it's really kind of a tension, how to sustain that. So these first three that I mentioned was pretty much all that we did for 20 years, and is documented in this book, Towards an Archaeology of the Soul. And that was printed in 2003, 20 years of distillation. And it has a lot of rituals that we did throughout those years, more than the other books. They're not as thoroughly explained or outlined, but there's a lot of them, and they can be departure points for almost any process of dance, theater, ritual, even song and painting and other artistic forms, for experimentation. And it also features, as the other two books too, reports from individuals either trained with me or people I've interviewed that inspire me. Because this has always been a group process for me, it's never been solo. So I've always included the work of others in my books. So this book here, State of Emergence, Experiments in Group Ritual Dynamics. This came out in 2020, shortly after I decided to stop doing everything. I figured, I want to write a book that accurately codifies this process so people can just take it into the workspace and apply it and just get to the work right away. So it's not big on theory, it's big on introducing the primary principles, very clearly what I call the trigger methods of paratheater, definitions of what, how to, play with those. And then it includes 5 rituals, very thoroughly outlined, from 5 levels of difficulty, like difficulty level number 1 up to difficulty level number 5. So you start at 1, and if you feel like, I can go a little more, so I can go to 2. I would not recommend going backward. I mean, you can try it, but good luck. Good luck. And then finally, this came out just about a month ago. Sacred Rites. Oh, you already know the subtitle. Where this represents what I would call the skeletal and muscular level of this work, like the bones of what this work is really about. This represents the soul of the work. And what I mean by that, it is filled with ritual journals of my own between the years of 2000 and 2011, doing the work myself, and simply reporting afterwards what I experienced, what happened to me during tonight for over 11 years. Also, it includes the reports of 12 others that trained with me doing the same thing. It also includes notes, production notes that I included on how these methods supported the more performative direction that resulted in here, in this room, 5 separate productions between 2016 and 2018, and also productions in Berkeley from 2004 to about 2010 or so. It's my favorite book. It's the only one that I keep reading because I can't believe I wrote it. You know, in that state when you're in, I kind of get a little bit beside myself. You know, it's not like spirit possession. It's not so much like that. It's more like being subject to the experience of my own energy at deeper and deeper levels of subjectivity, and flooded with images and visions, many of which inspired my films and the characters and visions for my theater work. You know, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Instead of reading the excerpt now, because I have just talked a lot. I'm just open it up to a little Q&A if anybody has any question. They can speak a little louder. I'm a little bit, in my old age, I've got a little bit of hearing loss. So I might be going, like that. That's what that means. I know it's a lot to ask.
I'll ask you, you said that about 30 years ago, you stopped being an anxious person. Can you expand on that? What led you to that position you found yourself in going forward from there?
Yeah, the question was about easing anxiety in my life until I didn't feel it anymore. It didn't happen 40 years ago because I was still a young man.
Oh, 30.
Or 30, more like 20 years ago.
Okay.
I might have got my numbers wrong or something. But it was around the age of 40 for me, maybe 45. Old age. I'm 70 years old now, I can't believe it. The perks of aging. The shift came by changing the context of the state of uncertainty to a creative state, meaning I decided to interpret the state of uncertainty as a creative state. And where I kind of got that was the movies I was watching at that time that I liked the most were the ones where I didn't know what was going to happen next. And the movies that I hated were the ones in the first 10 minutes I could see where it was going and I'm done. So there was something about uncertainty there, just in a safe place of watching a movie, where I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh, this is great. I don't know where things are going. That's okay. I don't need to know. I don't need to know. But then that moment, what a great thing to say. I don't need to know. Right? And that's where it came. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to understand. Just allow me to be in the moment, take in what's going on. I will follow it until I discover. The spirit of discovery became an excitement for me. More exciting than understanding something, more exciting than being in the know, and way more exciting than being right. I don't like the being right part. I opt for being happy more than right. And I have my own kind of happy, so it's not like happy. That's not me. I'm happy when I'm creative, staying creative. Yeah. Does that help?
Well, certainly.
Good question.
Reminded me of some things you said. There's a restatement, but an expansion as well.
Great question. Any other question? Yes?
Does a work of para-theater have a single intention? Is it a collection of individual intentions? Or does the intention not exist until the work is done?
All of them. That's really good. They're all there. Everyone more or less comes into the work for different reasons, but oftentimes, once they have one session, most of them come back because the work gets them high. They come out of the room, they're like lit. It's like, whoa, I'm more awake, I'm feeling great. What was that? They may not understand what they went through, but they're feeling really good after that. It's a high. So that's what I call the hedonic motive, right? And that typically lasts differently with each individual. Some people can play that out longer than others, and other people just get, at some point, they'll get bored and frustrated. It's like, I'm not feeling that high anymore. Hey, Antero, can you give us a more powerful source? I really need to, I need a fix, man. And at that point, I have a speech. It's not a long speech, but basically it's, the hedonic motive is a certain fuel, right? And if you want to continue the work, you got to work on a higher grade fuel, another motivation. And the best word for me to describe that higher motivation is freedom. To come into some experience of genuine freedom. It had nothing to do with the culture's ideation of freedom as the consumerist code of, you know, being able to do whatever you want because you have the money, and instant gratification replaces the sense of immediacy. It's a tragic thing, you know, people lose the sense of immediacy, which that's the thing that brings us into some kind of actual experience, you know. Instant gratification is a frustration path. You keep wanting more. It's kind of a hungry ghost high. And that's when we go into shadow work. By reclaiming, well, becoming aware of, accepting, reclaiming more of these negative attributes of ourselves, perception starts opening up. There's a liberation. It turns out that the shadow, the repressed shadow archetype, is a tremendous source of oppression. People who have not claimed their shadow, or enough of it, let's say, are oppressed. They will never know freedom, and they will compensate by pushing an ego ideal of freedom, meaning getting my way more often. I always want to get my way. That's an ego freedom code. You know, that's its way of compensating for a lack of freedom because there's oppression that's in the way. So yeah, shadow work is an extraordinary liberating process, and if people are on board, and usually they are, they're intrigued, you know, by that, because it's a challenge. It's no longer just a feel good, I'm high. It's kind of like, oh, this is work, right? Yeah, there's also a reward. And the reward is a higher quality, higher grade fuel that's going to last you much longer. You go for months, years. You know, I've trained people for as long as 10 years in a row. They stayed with me all 10 years, even longer, or 4 years, 6 years, because they did their shadow work. And, you know, they are very grateful to have done that, because these are individuals that walk the earth, you know, as free individuals in many ways, at least to a much greater degree than maybe most people around them. Question? Yeah.
Kind of few. Try to find some words for them. What kind of, regarding no form, have you noticed postural changes in yourself?
Just speak up.
Have you noticed postural changes in yourself or others, maybe pertaining to the no form position they take or daily life over the course of the work?
Okay, say that again. I'm going to listen closer.
Have you noticed postural changes in individuals that have continued to work over a period of time?
Yes, I have actually. Another intriguing question. Have I noticed postural changes or integrations of individuals who have gone through this work, they would have to have gone through this work at least a couple years for the integration process to happen, because that's one of the most challenging parts about this work. The things that you learn in the workspace, you're not going to immediately be able or find necessarily how to integrate them in civilian life. You know, how to apply that, it's quite a challenge. And some individuals, they don't know how to do it. So it can happen starting the 2 years. I started doing it early on. I just found very little difference between experience in the workspace. It's still the same life out there. It's just not, it doesn't have a roof out there, it's just a sky. It's the same place. So I've been integrating quite a bit, and I had good posture until I started becoming an old man. And I started becoming an old man in my 60s. I was a young old man, and then when I turned 70, it was an acceleration. I became an actual old man, which I really love. I was just really kind of sick of being a young man for so long. You know, in a 50-year body or 40-year body. It was, I don't know, it was kind of enough. I'm old, thank you. It's good. It's good. Old is good. There are perks of aging. Not everyone is privileged to achieve it. Not everyone gets there. A lot of people check out way before. Oh, they don't get it. Life. So the fourth level, I just want to just briefly run through it. I didn't really touch on it. It's something that was more or less applied in the last 20 years and more intensively here in Portland. And the performative level is really one where you're taking the development level, which is you practice all these ritual skills and techniques, and you're then moving into a place where it's your responsibility to find expressions of whatever's coming through you with enough clarity and articulation that if somebody's watching from the outside, they don't know what it is, that they start noticing patterns of motion or relatable motifs, or it starts looking like something's going on, like there's an actual character coming out. They can say, oh, I know that person, or I know this energy, where there's this recognition starting to happen that is the result of you becoming more clear in your articulation of what's coming through you. So it's really a transition from the third stage, first, third, and third stages of self-expression into the fourth level of communication. They're not the same, you know. We all know when two people can get together and they're expressing themselves, no communication. They're not getting the picture the other's sending. So articulation, all essential. So learning that difference, what does it mean to actually communicate? It means listening. It means being able to articulate relatable forms, identifiable forms where other people can say, oh, that's what that is. And in many ways, it's about making statements. You know, you're coming forth, and you're saying, this is who I am at this moment. This is my situation at this moment. This is the state of my being at this moment. And other people are getting the picture that you're sending, or at least part of it. Maybe not intellectually. See, this is the thing with this work in performance itself. There'll be, you know, anywhere from 6 to 10 people performing. Only one of them will relate to the audience. And this is our link to allow the audience to enter this space of experience. The rest of the individuals out here, the performers, don't relate to the audience. They don't look at them. What they're really busy doing is committing as fully as they can to specific sources in their body and responding to those sources with as much genuine spiritual and visceral resonance, so that resonance starts rippling out into the audience, so the audience is starting to get a wave of resonances. So when you get a group of individuals 100% committed to their experience, not thinking about, oh, what does it look like, or I'm going to entertain you, I'm going to impress you, or no, that's gone. None of that. It's just emanation coming off of this, and the audience is like receiving it. And I had the fortune, see, I would sit back by the projection booth for 4 of those 5. The 5th one I was performing. And I was able to watch the audience. And the most, probably the most common response, their mouths would, and then they go like this. So they were absorbing something. You know, the mouth opens when the baby opens, it's oral, opens, it's passive, it's taking it in. And the audience, for the most part, quiet. And, you know, as performers, you know there's like 100 different kinds of audience quiet. You know, they're not all the same. Some quiets are deadly, you know, horrible. But the other quiet, they're like golden. It's just like, yes, there's something there's a transmission happening here. And that's what it is. It's a theater of transmission is basically, you know, what I would call it. All right, I'm going to stop the Q&A bit here. I'm just going to indulge you. I'm just going to read one excerpt. I was going to read 2, but I'm going to read 1, and then we'll move on. So, very much. Okay, I'm going to take a vote. Do I share something about the Anima lab or the Ancestors lab? Any? Raise your hand if you want to hear the Anima lab excerpt. Okay, raise your hand if you want to hear the Ancestors lab excerpt. Oh my gosh, that's kind of even. Shit. All right, well, I'll do Anima first.
Ancestor lab, I would like to hear it.
So what?
I was there at the Ancestor lab, so I would very much like to hear that.
You were, I know. It's in the book, you're in the book. Yeah, your name's in the book. All right, so I'm going to just go head into this. After entering the personal temple space, the workspace, I sense an absence of anima charge and step back outside to deepen my no form. As no form deepens, I ask the anima to show me what I need, and then I step back into the temple space. The anima is gone. Yet her answer to my question is everywhere. I need risk. My emotional need for challenge is seriously frustrated. Shit. I actually need awareness of danger to feel alive. My body turns clockwise, a slow-mo whirling, my mind flooded with images of an emotional plague, immobilizing individuals in society with its deadly apathy, unclaimed guilt and anxiety. Oh yeah, that's danger enough. The toxic shock of so much backed up, unexpressed, repressed responses to life experiences, the great unwashed, the bottomless tub of runny shit, corrosive emotional slush. Don't identify with it. I repeat to myself, disidentify, don't be it, relate with it. The emotional plague, a horrific nightmare of species ignorance. I don't like being as sensitive to the shit tragedy of the world. It's too much. I feel sick. And then just as suddenly I hear her whisper, just deal with your own shit. Anima. Oh, what a gal. I thank her and return to no form. What a gal. Okay, hopefully this will be quick here. Oh, the ancestors, what a complex lab that was. Okay, after the group enters no form, we all step into the candle flickering ancestor space. Stopped in my tracks, and unable to absorb anything, nothing happens. As I yield to inaction, an impulse arises in me to move throughout the workspace for the ancestors, not just for me. As I continue responding to the space as I move, my energy escalates. As its intensity gathers momentum, I direct its force into service to the ancestors. So I'm not doing it for me now. What develops in me is a sense of protectiveness. Is it my own or the ancestors? I don't know. And then I find myself stalking the outer periphery of the room, its borders, like a sentry guarding a fortress or treasure, like that was my job. As long as the borders were secured, my purpose there was fulfilled. This guardianship ritual marks my transition into the warm-up and my personal polarity of grandfather-grandmother. Here, I discover and imbibe the gentle emanations of mercy, grandma, and the electrical jolts of severity, grandpa, that expand in me and give rise to the stoic, grandpa, and the saint, grandma, who eventually crystallizes two statues facing each other on a garden floor of dead leaves. After the personal polarities, we all convene in the no-form corridor for the group polarity of parental conditioning on one side. Oh, boy, that's heavy. Innate being on the other side. And we're standing in the middle in no form. Innate being, who we were before impacted by parental conditioning. Much of this complex experience proves way too large and too valuable for words. What I can say is this: parental conditioning acts on my innate being as a structuring force critical for the manifestation of my dreams in the out there world, the kind of boot camp training for the earthbound soul. I discovered something about my sense of humor. If I was able to stay connected with innate nature while moving throughout the parental conditioning part, I could laugh off the family guilt trips and strictness of rules. It was extremely funny doing everything I was told. Totally. How weird is that? On the side of innate being, the experience confirmed a profound inner strength in an innocence born from wisdom, not naivete. Both sides of this dynamic polarity were clearly in cahoots with each other, serving a larger purpose of preparing and testing the incarnating soul for planetary life. This polarity proved profound for others as well. I was pleased to hear my Sunday night suggestions. In this lab, Sunday night we met at my house for dinner, where we just talked about what happened. So it was 2 nights a week. To hear my Sunday night suggestions were applied to good results. I feel the empowering result of this ritual will stay with me as long as I can stay in touch with my innate being and my sense of humor.